Need a savior.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a new year and a new episode of the Atheist Experience.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. It's January 1st, 2006. I'm your host this week, Matt Dillahunty, filling in for Russell Glasser. And we just heard from Dan Barker, not to be confused with Don Baker, who's our co-host this week.
That's right.
Dan Barker's one of the guys from the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
That's right. He's one of the founders.
Former minister who's now an atheist and
He's written extensively
writes a lot of music.
and writes music, yes, which is fun.
So this is a live call-in program. We'll have the number up for you shortly, but we've got a few announcements to get out of the way first. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road. Those begin at 11:30. They're open to all atheist or atheist-friendly people. And it's every Sunday except for the third Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series, which normally takes place at the Austin History Center at 9th and Guadalupe at 12:30. But this coming would be the January 15th.
That's right.
We're going to be going to Inner Space Caverns, and you've got...
Yeah, it's kind of an unusual lecture. What we're going to do is we're going to go up to Inner Space Caverns and have a lecture there by one of our members, Joe Zamecki, who actually is an employee there, and he'll give us a special atheist tour of the Inner Space Caverns, and we'll learn about the history of them and see the formations and that sort of thing. And we're actually going to meet up at the caverns instead of at our usual location at the History Center. So check our website for more information. I believe there will be a cost for this, so you'll need to check on that.
Okay, and we'd be meeting up the cavern somewhere...
We'll meet there at 12:30.
Okay.
Meet there at 12:30.
Right. Great. Those meetings are open to any atheist or atheist-friendly people who'd like to join. Mm-hmm. On the second Sunday of the month, there's a board meeting, which is held at 10 o'clock at Schlotsky's on South Lamar, just south of the bridge. All ACA members are encouraged to attend, but only board members can vote. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors an internet audio program called The Nonprofits. That's broadcast every Saturday at 2 p.m. Central. It's live every other Saturday. We were live yesterday. It's normally broadcast over at freethoughtradio.com. However, freethoughtradio.com is going to be down for the month of January. So if you visit the Nonprofits website, which is nonprofitsradio.com, or you can go to atheist-community.org and click on the Nonprofits Radio Show link, you can get information about how to connect to us directly, because we will be doing a show on the 14th, even though Free Thought Radio won't be carrying it. We did a show yesterday, which was not broadcast over Free Thought Radio, and if you'd like to listen to that, you can go to the Nonprofits website and download the audio. If it's not up to date, it'll be up soon.
So there's archives there of half a dozen shows.
Archives of our past shows are up there. There's also podcasting of it. It's hosted by Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis Lubay, and also features Russell Glasser and myself. And there's some good stuff on there. We talked a lot yesterday about the judge's decision on intelligent design, about the failure of the war on Christmas, and
all the fun year-end topics.
Yeah, and a lot of year-end failed end times prophecies. Jeff brought in a list of, this guy said the world was going to end on October 15th, and this one said it was going to end on October 20th, and oddly enough, we're all still here. But more information on that's available at the ACA website or at the nonprofitsradio.com. In addition to the radio programs, we also host a number of social events throughout the week. On Mondays, we have Godless Gamers at the home of Russell Glasser, where we get together and play board games, card games, whatever strikes our fancy. More information on that is available at the website. On Tuesdays, we have started having Unholy Rollers. We're going roller skating at the Playland Skating Rink, which is Tuesday is their adult night. So from 7 to 10:30, it's adults only. If there's enough interest among people who have kids, we'll consider doing it at another time as well. Playland is located near 183 in Burnett on McCann Drive, just behind the Nissan dealer. And Thursdays we have Atheist Happy Hour at Antonio's Tex-Mex, which is located on the southbound feeder road of I-35, just a little south of 183. That begins at 7:30. It's chips, salsa, dinner, conversation, beer, tequila, whatever floats your boat. Come down and meet some ACA members, have a good time, and get a little bite to eat. And also, we have dinner after the show every week. The cast and crew get together, and lately we've been going down to Mongolian Barbecue at 11710 San Jacinto Jacinto on 2nd Street, or near 2nd Street, downtown. The show runs till 6 o'clock. We normally get there somewhere between 6:30 and 6:45. As with all of our events, any atheist or atheist-friendly people are welcome to join us. You don't have to be a member to attend. But if you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, that's not welcome, because some of us would, actually like to eat or discuss other things. If you're wanting to have a conversation or tell us why we're wrong and you're right, we'll have the telephone number for you shortly, and you'll be able to call in and talk about it on the air. We'll get the number up soon, but first we've got Don here to...
Yeah, well, today I wanted to do a kind of a back to the basics sort of show for the first of the year, and talk about faith and belief, and whether that's worthwhile, or if there's anything good there or not. A lot of religions promote faith as a virtue.
Right.
We usually have a sign up that says skepticism is a virtue, but for color balance reasons, we have trouble with it. So anyway, so let's start. Anybody who's got email gets these emails every now and then, and it starts off something like this usually: request for an urgent business relationship. First, I must solicit your strictest confidence in this transaction. This is by virtue of the nature of being utterly confidential and top secret. I am sure and have confidence of your ability and reliability to prosecute a transaction of the great magnitude involving a large sum of money, so on. If you read on, and these folks are in trouble, they need your help. They have this huge pile of money sitting in some bank account somewhere, and they need your help in transferring it around.
How do I get a hold of them?
How do you get a hold of them? Well, just wait. You'll get
sounds like a great
email.
deal.
Sounds like a great deal. And for helping them out, you get a cut of this money. In this particular one, it's 20% of $21 million, which is $4 million. Small change for helping these guys out. And they want you to send. They say that this transaction is 100% safe. They want you to keep this in confidentiality because the reasons behind it are a little bit shady, and they don't want them to tip off the authorities, that sort of thing. And the first thing they want is your some letterhead from you and your company's name and that sort of thing. Anyway, these things are well. First off, Matt, what would you think if you got one of these emails? Would you like rush to get your letterhead out and send these guys?
No.
No.
Actually, the first one I ever got, I read the whole thing through twice, just to make sure. It wasn't that I necessarily bought into it, but I was. First of all, the English is usually questionable.
Well, that's part of the charm, I think.
So you have to read it a couple times for clarity, and then it's. When I start thinking about it for a while, now when I get them, which is 4 or 5 times a week, it's just delete.
Okay, so you don't buy it. You don't believe it.
No,
you don't believe it.
I have a hard time believing that anybody.
Okay, okay.
And, not that people would believe it.
Do you have any pithy thing about why you don't believe it? Is any sort of what advice would you give to someone about these sorts of things?
Well, you could kind of go back to the whole thing about get-rich-quick schemes and making an easy buck, and
right. It's too good to be true.
Too good to be true.
That's right. So that's kind of a tip-off. That's at least a tip-off, right? Well, it turns out
it's a cause to be very skeptical about it. If something sounds too good to be true, that doesn't mean it's necessarily false, but there's a really good chance.
Right. So that's the gist of it, and you can read about these sorts of things on a website called Snopes.com, and we have a little graphic for that. There's a whole bunch of different urban legends out there that you might come across in email, usually an email, or a friend might tell you something about it, and then you wonder whether they're true or not, and there's a website that will help you figure that out. And these are called the Nigerian scams because they tend to come from Nigeria, or mention some sort of a diplomatic official in Nigeria or whatever. They're also called 419 or advanced fee fraud schemes. Anyway, there's a long write-up about it. It's worth reading. It's worth not getting trapped by it. There's a lovely little article that talks about the bit of fiction that becomes part of the story, which has to do with some government official or some son of a king or something that you have to get out of jail or whatever. It focuses on all the little distraction, which acts like the sleight of hand where you keep one hand, kind of the audience with their attention on one hand while you do the magic trick with the other.
Right.
That's the sort of purpose it serves.
One of the cooler things about the ones that I find to be better written and more entertaining or convincing, instead of saying we can't get this money out because it's necessarily a violation of the law, they make it look like we're being oppressed, we're being unfairly held down, and you would be doing us a great favor. So not only do you stand to profit millions of dollars,
but you're helping these poor folks out.
You might be breaking a law, but you're doing it for a really good reason.
Right. And there's usually a civil war involved or something. So that's pretty cool. These scams tend to have a lot of features to them. They tend to have a good yarn associated with it, right? That kind of keeps you entertained and distracted, right? That's part of it. Another very important feature is they're difficult to verify, right? It's hard to find out whether the story is true. They're in another country, another continent, another language. How are you going to figure this stuff out? And then of course they got this confidentiality thing where you shouldn't be asking your friends about this, right? Because you might tip off the authorities and these people might be killed, or who knows, right? Of course, there's always the pandering to greed. You're going to get this huge payoff. I mentioned the illicit stuff, and eventually they squeeze you for money. They say, oh, we had a snag, we need a little bit of money to get this, this paperwork or this account opened or whatever.
Prime in the pump.
Well, actually, that's really what the purpose of these is they send you money. You might think they're after your bank account, but that's not actually true. Many of these are actually just after the nickels and dimes that they squeeze out of you until you finally figure out that you've been had. Okay, let's pitch another one. Here's another thing that might come to you. I can guarantee you can cheat death and you will have an afterlife of eternal bliss. All you have to do is believe in God. Do you believe it?
Wow. It sounds so plausible. No.
Well, it's a good story. There's this whole Christ thing. It's suffering, and it kind of keeps you distracted. It's difficult to verify, right? You might not. You might not be able to,
unless you can talk to the dead, which there's people like John Edwards who claim they can,
right?
Despite the fact that they look like big old frauds.
Infinitely old people myself. Everybody I know has an age below 100 or so. Pandering to greed. Well, are you going to benefit by this thing? Well, maybe so. Looks eternal bliss sounds like a benefit. Are you getting squeezed for something? Are you getting? Is there a hook here? I think there is, and we'll talk about that a little later. Okay, so that's what we're going to start and talk about today is belief and faith. Matt and I had a little discussion about what the definitions are. I claim that belief is acting or thinking based on the absence of knowledge or evidence, and he calls that faith. And so that's really what we're talking about is trusting something without evidence. I had defined faith as a belief or trust in God. Anyway, but we're going to focus on beliefs for which you have no evidence or faith, and then we're also going to focus on religious beliefs and religious faith. So that's the topic of today's show. Religion promotes faith as a virtue, even faith that contradicts evidence. So we have a problem here. I claim that beliefs are liabilities in the sense that the more you have, the worse off you are. If you are believing, you are guessing or adopting somebody else's hidden agenda, right? If you are believing something rather than knowing something, that's bad. If you're believing something that somebody else told you, then maybe they're trying to manipulate you, and you should be at least aware of that possibility. We claim that skepticism is a virtue, especially religious skepticism. There's a wonderful quote by a guy named Penn Jillette, who is a magician. Penn and Teller, very famous magician. He's the big guy that talks. The other one's the quiet guy. He wrote a little piece, or did a radio spot on National Public Radio, I guess about a month ago. And I'm going to quote a little bit here. He says, "Believing there is no God means the suffering I've seen in my family, and indeed all the suffering in the world, isn't caused by an omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent force that isn't bothered to help or is just testing us, but rather something that we all may help each other with in the future. No God means the possibility of less suffering in the future." Beautiful quote. I think I'll stop there. So that's kind of where we're coming from. Is that if you believe in gratuitous things, that's not a good thing, and you can make a whole bunch of arguments that religious beliefs are not sound. For example, religious beliefs contradict science and the evidence. They contradict creationism, contradicts evolution, which is very sound science at this point. Religion proposed that the Earth was the center of the world, and that's or the center of the universe, and that's not true. What else? Problems do we have? We have religious manuals like the Bible are self-contradictory, and this whole notion of beliefs in the Bible evolve over time. I'm going to pull up an article here. Vatican Rethinking Tradition of Limbo. This was in Wednesday's December 28th Statesman. Basically saying, well, we're not so sure about this limbo thing. It was a theological band-aid to create a place for babies to go before they were born or baptized or whatever. They went to limbo and they weren't being tortured. And supposedly some good guy atheists are there too.
It was actually a bigger Band-Aid than that.
Yeah?
Limbo as a Band-Aid was because you have Christianity, which is an extension of Judaism. I mean, Jesus Christ was supposed to be the Messiah. Uh-huh. And within the Christian doctrine, as established by the Church, despite the contradictions of exactly how you attain salvation, the predominant claim is that you attain salvation through faith, and that a faith and belief in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ is fundamentally essential to whether or not you're saved. That means that everybody who lived and died before Jesus died couldn't possibly have reached that understanding and acceptance, couldn't possibly have been saved by that. So where are they? They couldn't have possibly gone to heaven. So the Church invented limbo to encapsulate all of those people, whether you're talking about babies who haven't reached the age of reason, people who died before then, other extenuating circumstances, maybe people of diminished mental capacity, etc. So it was just this big kind of holding tank, and it worked out really well because then they could charge people money for the priests to pray your loved one out of limbo into heaven.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So it's not only a Band-Aid, it's a really big-ass Band-Aid, and it got to be expensive.
Nice little confidence trick.
When the sides of when the sides of your toilet are gilded in gold, odds are you're making some money somewhere.
So are we talking about whose toilet are we talking about?
Well, the toilet's at the Vatican.
Oh, okay. Good deal. So I find it just tremendously amusing as an atheist to see that they're rethinking it. That oops, maybe it doesn't exist, or maybe let's see. Pope Ratzinger said, personally, I would let it drop since it always has only been a theological hypothesis. So anyway, maybe they've decided they can't make money off of it anymore or something.
That may well be the case. There's and the question. Like I said, the biggest reason that it was invented in the first place, to explain those people prior to Jesus' existence,
right.
That has now already been resolved. They have new doctrines which say either, okay, now those people are in heaven, because in the Apocrypha, Jesus makes his trip down to hell and releases those who have been held there. But they transcribe that to limbo as well, and it goes on.
Well, isn't that fun? Okay.
It always strikes us kind of as amusing, I guess, and a little odd that this kind of doctrine by vote thing comes along. Hey, we're going to get together, and I think it's time we reevaluate limbo.
It's like this focus group, right?
Yeah, but it really shouldn't come as that big a surprise, because that's exactly how the Bible got put together in the first place. You had a variety of councils and a lot of political maneuvering and backstabbing, and whoever had was the most vocal and held the most power and could control the most people, the books that they liked got voted in, and the other books got voted out. So if your entire doctrine is put together by vote, it's not that big of a surprise that a couple thousand years later they'll just vote out parts of it. And I see a lot of Christians who today are very different from what we would consider Christians 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or 800 years ago, whatever. And Christianity, as it's taught from the pulpit, is changing too. And then I think that's actually helping to stir up the fundamentalists, because they're unwilling to change. And where you have reasonable liberal Christians, like Reverend Barry Lynn from the Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, well, they're not real Christians. They're not representing true Christianity. You can't do that. We're talking about fundamentalism, and on the other side you've got Falwell, Robertson, and Fred Phelps, who I lump in one bucket, despite the fact that I recognize that Phelps is farther out than the other two, but not much.
Right. So we have the fact that these religions are evolving, right, and they're changing, and this limbo is just an excellent example of, believe this today, don't believe this tomorrow. And then a number of folks are wanting to hold on to whatever they think is the true thing, right? And all this tension between them, and that's evidence to me that we're not talking about reality here. We're talking about fantasy, and we're arguing over which version of the lie we're gonna is the most plausible, or the one that's going to get the most people in the door in church or whatever, right? And this gets into another subject of, well, why else don't we think that religious beliefs are sound? Well, religious people who claim to have the same faith disagree on a lot of very big issues, like the war in Iraq. More or less, the country's divided in half as to whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, and there's a lot of religious arguments on both sides from Christianity. There's dissension in education. Should there be public education? How important is education? Should education be done in the home, in Christian schools, or whatever? The death penalty. A lot of disagreement among Christians on the death penalty. Poverty. A lot of Christians think that Jesus was about helping the poor. But those who are currently in power don't do very much about it, even though they've been elected on a Christian slate, basically. The environment, homosexuality, all of these things are many of them are causing schisms in the churches and disagreement. And basically, it means to me that these guys don't have consistent beliefs. They don't have. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up.
Yeah, they'll spend all day saying, we're true Christians and you're not true Christians, and trying to draw these dividing lines of what's a true Christian and what isn't. But yet, when the push comes to shove, the person that they just got finished saying isn't a true Christian is true Christian enough to help them out. When we're counting up how many Christians there are in the United States, boy, everybody's a true Christian. Well, Catholics, Protestants, Jehovah's Witnesses.
My feeling is ecumenicism is just a means of covering up thuggery, right?
Yeah.
If there's thuggery involved, there's probably ecumenicism. That means they're banding together to cover something up.
Yeah, anyway. I may not think you're a true Christian, but at least you're not an evil atheist.
Okay. Another reason why religious beliefs might not be sound. Well, religions have made very sparse contributions to the betterment of mankind. Let's contradict religion and science. There's a quote by Richard Feynman, famous physicist, that says, "Religion is a culture of faith, science is a culture of doubt." And I think that nails it pretty well. Science and technology from science has given us tremendous amounts of philanthropy. We have medicine, we have good food, we have good water, shelter, high quality of life, good education. All of that is due to science and technology. Religions, on the other hand, have sought to suppress science, from all the way from Galileo to the Archimedes pamphlet, all the way up to intelligent design today. It's still doing it, still at it. Let's see. Next reason why religious beliefs are not sound. Religious belief is the source of many social problems. There is this really wonderful article that's on our website in the news area called Cross-Natural Correlations of Quantifiable Societal Health with Popular Religiosity and Secularism in the Prosperous Democracies. Okay, so that's the title of it. A guy by the name of Gregory S. Paul, he's written about, he's done some statistical studies about religious beliefs in various countries versus various social ills in those various countries, and has found a correlation with religious belief and these social ills. Now, it's not causality. He's not arguing that there's causality, although I think you can make a pretty good case. Some of these social ills include homicide, youth suicide, child mortality, lower life expectancy, teen pregnancy, teen STDs. It's not hard to see that religions are out there, conservative Christianity especially is out there promoting this contraceptive misinformation and making sure that contraceptives are not there and that sort of thing. It's not hard to see how that leads to teen STDs and teen pregnancy, for example. I think that all of these can be explained by religion, by the beliefs.
I think there's a certain amount to that. This guy who published this has been coming under attack like crazy by some extreme fundamentalists. They're just flat out lying, saying that he's saying religion causes it. Doesn't he know what correlation is? When he's very clear in there that he's talking about correlation and not claiming causation.
I think there was a news reporter who misreported that it was causation, and they should be attacking that news reporter, not the author of the study, who was very careful in that regard.
But the one thing that I found most compelling about that particular report, I'll agree all day long and twice on Sunday. And hey, today's Sunday, so I'll say it twice. I agree. It's not causation, it's correlation. But the important point is that religionists often portray the myth that a more religious society is necessarily a healthier social society. This proves that is distinctly false. That there is no positive assertion that they're making that religion will make your society better. That is demonstrably false. Whether or not religion necessarily makes your society worse, that's kind of
the verdict is still out.
It's still out. There's definitely a correlation.
It's not looking good.
And when you look at tinier fragments of correlation, I mean, this was the United States versus a whole bunch of other. I mean, this was at the country level. If you go down, you can do the same study within the United States and talk about. I hate to just draw a clean north-south dividing line, especially since I'm on the wrong side of it. But where the Bible Belt, take a look at Lubbock, Texas, for example, where they have this abstinence-only sex education class in school. They're not giving students good information, and yet they have some of the highest rates of STD, teen pregnancy. So whether or not it's actually religion that's doing the harm or people who are buying into religion that's doing harm, something's doing harm. Even if it's just promoting ignorance and stymieing the advancement of good education and good information to people who need it.
Yeah. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to draw a conclusion that that's probably the cause. You know, this is misinformation, leads to improper behavior because you don't have the right information. You've been manipulated effectively. So this particular issue is like, well, if belief is actually the cause of bad things to society, that raises a really deep theological question of, well, if your God doesn't want to show himself and wants you to believe in him and wants things to and is ultimately good, we've got a contradiction there, right? Because the sum of those things is people are believing in the absence of knowledge, and bad things are happening as a result of that. So what does that say about these claims? What does it say about God if that's the case? So
there's one aspect of Christianity in particular, or at least, I don't know, perhaps I can only speak from experience with Christians I've met within Pentecostal, Southern Baptist churches and everything else, that reminds me of this Nigerian scam. On the one hand, they're wanting money. That's not a secret. A tithe is expected out of good Christians in various churches. It's not required. I mean, you don't have to necessarily give a tithe to be a member, but it's expected, and offerings are also there. So there's some financial gain to the church. After all, the church wants to keep running. But the promise of God rewarding, because God rewards the faithful. And if you are a believer and walk in the Spirit of God, God's going to do great things in your life. And yet the flip side of that is, and this is what they're often taught and what I've heard come out of relatives' mouths and preachers' mouths on many occasions, is that additionally, if you are a good Christian and you're walking in the Spirit and doing things that Jesus wants you to do, the devil also steps up his rate of attack on you. He goes after the faithful. And what this does is it sets up a situation where something good happens, God did it. And when something bad happens, the devil did it. And you get this sort of confirmation bias of, I'm expecting such and such to happen, and when it does or doesn't, I know who to blame. When you look at the whole situation with a much more objective view, it's just the nature of life. You know, good things are going to happen to you sometimes, and bad things are going to happen to you sometimes, and you can't necessarily say that one was caused by X and the other was caused by Y. Maybe God was mad at you that day. Maybe neither one of them exist, and it's all just the nature of things, you know. Humans interacting. Humans, you know, are fundamentally selfish in many areas, and you know, while I would like to do things that always benefit, you know, others as well, there are times when I'm going to do things that just benefit me, and the point for me is to try to make sure that I'm not inflicting harm on others while I'm doing that as well. But just because something doesn't go my way doesn't mean somebody was out to get me. It's kind of almost a paranoid thing. But
yeah. Well, why don't we announce that we're a live call-in show? I'll let you do that.
You did.
I did? We're a live call-in show.
We are a live call-in show. It is January 1st, 2006. We're starting off a whole new year. The number's up right there. And we won't be actually reading out the number because this show is rebroadcast on ACTV, and I think there's some other people that are going to be doing it over podcasting as well. And
you're right.
So if you're not seeing a telephone number right now, we're not live. Don't call in because you never know who's in the studio. But for those of you who can see the number, feel free to give us a call. Right now, we're essentially talking about faith and whether or not it's a virtue, or beliefs based on faith, and what determines whether or not your beliefs are founded within reasonable. Okay.
Let me do a little bit more, and we'll take some callers. I have lots more, but we'll do a little bit more, and then. So we talked about the fact that religious beliefs are not sound. So and that you might run into trouble buying into them. How do you measure a scientific theory or an assertion or a fact? How do you measure faith? And that's what I want to talk about next. And for a scientific theory or a fact, you test it against reality. You see if it's true. You do some empirical test. It's an objective test. Hopefully everybody else can repeat it, and everybody agrees that this explains whatever, or at least this is a reasonable explanation. If it fails, then you throw it away, and you don't look back, basically. So as Feynman said, science is a culture of doubt. Go ahead.
I agree with what you're saying. I think it may be an overstatement to say you throw it away, because in many cases you want to go back and figure out why it failed, and maybe rework it.
Yeah, you want to certainly learn from it.
That process is also a fundamental part of science.
Right.
But what you said is sound.
Science is this process, right, of doing that. So how do you measure faith? Well, you measure faith by your emotional attachment to it, right? So already we're going down the wrong path as far as I'm concerned. It's how well can you hold on to your faith despite all evidence against it is really how you measure your faith. If somebody is a true believer, that's how it comes across, and you can actually quantify that, I think. And this may get some callers. How many people would you kill to make your God happy? So that's your measure of faith. If it's 1 or if it's 0.
Wow.
So ask yourself that: how many people would you kill? Assuming your God said it was perfectly fine to do that, or you could rationalize that, right? That's
a huge can of worms.
That's a huge can of worms, and we saw that play out in 9/11, right? We had folks that's like, oh well, we got to get rid of the infidels, or whatever, right? all the religious wars are based on this whole idea of get rid of the people that make God unhappy, even if they worship the same God, which Christians and Muslims and the Jews do. They worship the same God. Anyway, so let's take some callers. I'm sure we'll get some life out of that.
And actually, looks like we got a special caller right off the bat. One of the ACA members who's going to be hosting us on the tour on the 15th. Joe, you there?
Yes, hello.
How you doing?
Hi.
Great. Hi, Don. Hi, Matt.
Hey, good to see you.
And also hi, Dave and Chuck and everybody else involved down there.
Absolutely.
They're all waving.
Say, thanks a lot for mentioning the lecture in the cave on January 15.
You bet. I'm looking forward to
fill
it.
in a little bit of detail there. By the way, if anybody has any questions and needs more info about that, they can email me. I'm Joe Zamecki, so my email address is joezamecki@hotmail.com. And I'm a tour guide at Inner Space Cavern in Georgetown, and it's a lot of fun to go there, and it's just a feast for the eyes. Yes, it is relevant to atheism, too, and I'll let you know about that if you email me, or if you know me in person, you probably already know about that issue. And also on the issue of belief, I've often found that a whole lot of believers can really just tailor-make their religion the way they want and shape their God emotionally, culturally, and even physically the way they want, simply because there's no solid point of reference in a real, literal God that we can all go to find out exactly what the truth is on that God.
That's right. When you get right down to it, everybody believes something different, sometimes radically different, and sometimes just subtly different.
And faith is a perfect defense against disproof, because once you've got a belief held together by faith, nothing anybody can say can disprove it.
Right. And in case you have a challenge about your God and its attributes, you can easily change its attributes to shape whatever whim or need you have. And again, no one can ever take you to that God and show you how your idea of that God was slightly incorrect, even just a little bit.
Right.
And much less take it to another God and say you had the wrong God. Which reminds me of Rowan Atkinson did live when he had his show years ago, a famous British comedian. He played Mr. Bean, and he said he was pretending to be Satan. And he said, okay, Christians, come on in here, into hell. Yes, I'm sorry. The Jews were right.
Yeah.
So it could be anybody's guess. Anyway, thanks a lot for talking to me. And again, it's joezamecki@hotmail.com if you have comments or questions.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah. Y'all have a great day.
You too. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that tour. And, Joe makes some great points, not just about Rowan Atkinson, who I'm a huge fan of. I mean, I have all the Blackaders on DVD, and
that was a good show.
A friend of mine has some of his stand-up stuff. But, yeah, he's another, I believe he's an atheist. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But there is a website that tracks celebrity atheists, so I'll have to go check it out later. I've just kind of always presumed it based on some of the things that he said. And he was also very vocal with regard to some laws in Great Britain which violated church-state separation type of issues. Mm-hmm. But yeah,
I guess in Great Britain, the laws are not as strict there. I mean,
they don't have really church-state separation. They have the Church of England as a pseudo theocracy. Right. The thing that's amusing about that is that it's not a big deal because they don't have these people in the Church of England running around saying, at least not to the extent that we do. This is the way it is because God said so, and you guys are all wrong. They have a rather decent-sized secular and atheist population segment. So
yeah, well, we should do a show on demographics someday. This is some interesting stuff there.
That'd be good too.
Yeah.
Want to go on any more calls?
Yeah, let's take a couple more callers and then I'll go back.
All right, we got Steve. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Hi.
Well, one comment. What the heck is a theological hypothesis anyway? Do they do a theological experiment and then disprove the hypothesis, or they just
maybe the theological hypothesis was, hey, I think we can make money off this crap, and after a few hundred years of testing, they found out they can't.
Terminology of science when they want to just throw something out, but they didn't do any experiments to throw it out. They just said,
I'm really glad you brought that up because it is a pretty funny statement. It's backpedaling is really what it is, right? Yeah. It's like, oh well, maybe that wasn't right after all. It was. So we'll just knock it down.
The topic of faith.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times you'll hear people say, this is a man of faith. There's a particular person I have in mind that says that a lot. It's when he's lauding somebody. But and it's as if no matter what you have faith in, to have faith is a good thing.
Yeah.
But I would bet if you asked anybody that is faithful that they would say, no, it's not good just to have faith in things. It's good to have faith in the things I think you should have faith in.
Right.
As opposed to skepticism, which is basically nobody who is skeptical would probably be bothered by somebody being skeptical of anything as long as they followed through and said, well, the reason I'm skeptical is I want to find out whether it's true or not, and I'll evaluate that later when I have more information. So a big difference between pure faith and pure skepticism, without talking about what you're skeptical of or faithful of, is that one of them, it just doesn't make any sense to say that purely faithfulness is a good thing. Even people who are faithful, I think, would agree. It's without talking about what the faithful target is. There's no good or bad about it.
Maybe they were actually
sort of cures itself.
Maybe the verse was referring to faith when it says all things in moderation. Just a little bit of faith.
Well, and that's one more little point. A third thing is that in terms of belief, which is holding something to be true for the time being, it doesn't have to be like you actually believe it to be true, but to use the word hypothesis again, you could say a working hypothesis. You're going, well, I can't figure out whether this is true or not, but right now I'm going to make a judgment call, and I'm going to say, I'm going to call it true as far as for practical purposes, but I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open, and I'm going to see how it goes, and I realize that I am doing this, and when things start changing, I can go back and go, wait a minute, maybe that wasn't such a good idea.
And be willing to go back and do that reevaluation. Right. That's how things should work. If you didn't do that,
you would have a very difficult time operating at all in the world. I mean, we know very little, really, for sure. It's so difficult to really know things. So atheists believe a lot of things if you take my idea of believing being, working like that.
Sure.
And so just in terms of for everybody that's out there that, atheists do believe things. It's just
all kinds of things.
When we say belief, it's sort of with a small b instead of a capital B or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
So you've made a good point. We don't have time to sit and reason about gravity when I pick up my cup. I have to to go by experience or a judgment or make a guess, and maybe I'm wrong, and I'm wrong a lot, and sometimes I get a chance to learn from it and do better next time.
Yeah, and I'll be listening for the first report of a religious experiment to go with the religious hypothesis.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks a lot for calling in, Steve. Yeah, I'm very much a rationalist in that my philosophical position on life is that the best way to establish beliefs and discern what is and isn't true about reality is that things need to have reasonable explanations, which is, and the more outrageous or the more extreme a claim is, the more evidence is required to support it. That's the way science works, in that we form tentative beliefs. I mean, for those people who run around saying evolution isn't a fact, it's just a theory. Well, guess what? So is gravity. So is sexual reproduction. So is anything science has learned, because science isn't about, defining things as absolutes. It's saying this is our best guess, our most likely explanation, and it's not, we didn't just pluck this out of our butt. This is how we think it works based on everything that we've got to analyze. And the other thing that's very important about science is that, when we find new evidence, when the situation changes, when the hypothesis, when the theory no longer fits the observation, we throw it out. We go back and we rework it. We figure out where things went wrong. Science changes. And, I had an offer as a kind of a bet with the viewers, if somebody could provide me an example of when religious belief has been able to show that a scientific theory is wrong, I'd buy them a steak dinner. And it's really not even a fair bet, because the only thing that can prove science wrong is more science. A religious assertion couldn't ever prove science wrong. But the foundation of that that I was using was, if you can show me an ancient religious belief which science directly contradicts, modern science says, no, that's wrong, and that ancient belief ends up being right, as an example, that's when you can claim that dinner.
Yeah, gloat.
Yeah. It's just, science
So
proves science wrong.
Science changes too, but it converges on the answer in a sense that reality is reality, and it's the same for everybody, and an explanation might get thrown out or revised, but the next one is going to be a better version. It's going to be more accurate, more.
We would hope.
That's
kind of the definition of progress, which I think is something we're striving for.
Right.
Although there seem to be this contingent of people who are perfectly willing to not only inhibit but perhaps retard progress.
It's kind of scary, isn't it?
Yeah. Want to keep going with calls?
Yeah. Take one more, and then I'll go and do a little rift.
Sure thing. We got another Steve. How you doing?
How you doing today?
Hi.
Hi. I want to try to win that steak dinner.
Oh, good.
Okay. I called y'all 2 weeks ago and asked y'all about free will, and y'all said go read "Freedom Evolves" by Daniel Dennett.
It wasn't. To be fair, it wasn't us that you talked to, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I also found out that he had a previous book called Consciousness Explained.
Mm-hmm. And he has other books, Darwin's Dangerous Idea and Elbow Room.
And he just came out with a brand new book that is about religion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was going to let you know that.
I'm anxious to read that. I haven't read it yet.
It wasn't at the store when I went to go pick it up, so maybe another week or so.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about contradictory evidence first before I try to win that steak.
Okay.
Contradictory evidence. Now, the way I look at it is, way back in primordial history, you had cells that were dividing. And when the cell divided, if it stopped eating for half an hour, it would allow its daughter cell to get far enough away to where it wouldn't compete with it for food. Now, the contradictory evidence would be, we'll just eat and eat and eat and eat. But mathematical probability shows that if you wait for 20 minutes until it can swim away, then, so not by God or by divine intervention, but just by mathematical probability.
Well, I would consider that an adaptation that maybe some bacteria do and some of them don't. So I'd say it's likely that some of them do that.
Yeah, but the contradictory evidence would if they could think, would be, well, right after I, split my cell and have a daughter cell, I should just eat. But that's because they don't have the brains to understand, and just by, not by God, but by blind chance and evolution, the wait 30 minutes after you split had a evolutionary advantage. So you don't need a God, but you do need the roll of the dice.
Okay. And one of the things that we're trying to do, and I know you're going to want to try and add something else on here, and I'll let you. But we're trying to keep the show open for as many calls as we can. I think, and if I'm understanding you right, so there's a couple problems there. One is that you're kind of anthropomorphizing these bacteria. And the other is that I have a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to when people say blind chance when they're talking about evolution, because while the mutations themselves are very much blind chance, the process of natural selection is anything but blind chance.
It's more of a
It's the exact opposite of blind chance. And whether it's a conscious decision, let's say, on the part of that bacteria, which obviously I think both of us would say it's not, to stop eating long enough for its daughter cell to get away, or whether or not those who do stop eating are the ones whose genes propagate, I think you've kind of got a little bit of answer there. It's not, the evolution doesn't go with a purpose. It's not, if I do this, my daughter cells will get farther away. It's more of those which don't do it, their daughter cells don't get farther enough away, and their genes don't continue to propagate.
Right? I agree with you totally.
Because I'm right. No, thanks though.
I think the word blind chance is a bad word to use, but I think what you said basically is what I was trying to say.
Well, good, because I'm not a scientist, and I'm not always sure if I explain it, in the right terms. I know how I understand it, but trying to figure out how somebody else is going to understand it so that we can, be on common ground's a little different. But.
So I want to see if you lose your steak dinner.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
What have you got for steak dinner?
Okay, for the steak dinner, we got to have a religious belief that scientists basically said it doesn't matter. And I'm going to use the Seventh-day Adventist approach, to where they say that, if you go to church every Sunday, you go to heaven. Now, basically, I can't remember whether keep the Sabbath holy or whatever the commandment is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from a scientific point of view, there is no real evidence that if you just pay attention, if you just become aware of every seventh day, if you just, every 7 days you just say, I'm going to become aware of this seventh day. I don't see, do you see any scientific evidence that, you can say, yeah, I can see why that would be,
I don't think science has an actual position on whether or not somebody goes to heaven if they observe every seventh day. Is
there any advantage to every seventh day being aware as opposed to every eighth day or every sixth day?
I don't know.
Okay, so you don't have a scientific position on that.
I don't believe that any day is necessarily any more sacred than any other day. Is there some biological rhythm unknown that operates on a 7-day cycle which could prove beneficial? I guess so. That's not anything that I would think would be easy to test or prove. Or
I can prove it.
Okay.
We're all, basically from an evolutionary point of view, I figure that we all evolved with the 3 pumps, the solar pump, the daily pump, the lunar pump, and the yearly pump. That because those were stable for the last billions of years, that those were the only stable pumps that, we got energy from, that we developed from.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let you go, and I'm not just trying to disconnect you. We got other calls going back. Hang on to this. Send it an email, and for anybody else who doesn't get on, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. We can talk about it a little bit offline, because I think we're going to run into some really big problems with definitions.
I'm just going to throw out that if the Seventh-day Adventist said instead of every 7 days, you follow the lunar cycle and make it every
28
lunar
days.
cycle, you become aware. Could that be proved to help you get more in cycle, more in way? I'm going to go ahead and get off the air now.
All right.
But is there any possibility that by just becoming aware of the lunar cycle, it would help you some way? And could that be construed as scientific?
Go ahead and send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to talk with you about this offline, and we can maybe address it on another show.
at atheist-community.org.
Yeah, because in a few weeks, I'll be here every week, and one of the things that I'd like to do is if there's something that I can't particularly address, or the co-host can't address in detail on a given show, rather than hold up all the other callers by keeping somebody on for a long period of time, take it offline and then hit it again on the next show. But I think in that particular case, there's some really undefined terms there when you're talking about pumps and energy. And
right. Much has been made about the woman's menstrual cycle being roughly the same as the lunar cycle, and is there any deep significance there? And I don't really think there is.
But the other thing is that even if you could show sufficient correlation between awareness, which is already a vague enough term. How are you keeping the seventh day holy or generating any awareness toward it? But even if you couldn't show a correlation between, let's say, the lunar cycle, which is 28 days, you still haven't broken it down to 7 days, because you could just as easily, divide it by 2 and say that it's 14 days. Or something along those lines. You can't get from 28 to 7 without something completely arbitrary being injected. And I think part of that is because we're so used to our calendar. We're
used to that, and we're also used to seeing patterns and things.
Yeah.
And we're wired to do that. And sometimes those patterns are significant, and sometimes they're they just look interesting, and we attribute significance to them when they're not.
Dembski's arguments about specified complexity. The core of his arguments is that humans would be able to actually recognize design in something, and there's some problems with that don't make that necessarily true. The email address again for the Inner Space Caverns tour, if you want more information about that, it's Zamecki, JOEZAMECKI @hotmail.com, and also, as you can see on the screen, any atheist or atheist-friendly people who'd like to meet up with the cast and crew, and there's a lot of people behind the cameras that you don't ever get to see who are working the cameras and working the booth and the sound.
We've got an audience member today, and that's nice to have.
We'll be going to Mongolian Barbecue on San Jacinto. That's downtown, near San Jacinto on 2nd Street.
That's right.
It's right there
near the convention center.
We'll be there somewhere between 6:30 and 6:45.
Come chat with us.
Yeah, any atheist or atheist-friendly people.
So let's take one more caller, and
Sure.
then I'll do a little bit more on belief and talk about beliefs and behaviors, and we'll take some more calls.
All right.
Okay.
Let's go on. We've got, is it Cecilia?
Yes, I can hardly hear you guys, though.
Oh, sorry. On your TV or on your phone?
On my phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they can turn that up.
Because it usually has that horrible reverb thing.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, it seems like a lot of believers, some believers, especially the fundies, they need that faith to, it provides structure for them. It provides, the dogmatic rules to live by, because God said so. It provides structure and comfort for them. And I think that's why science scares them so much, because it can change.
It can change, and very often it says, I don't know.
Yeah, and they don't like that.
It says the verdict is still out, and that's very uncomfortable for people. That's right.
Definitely.
Right.
And I know for myself, I'm not atheist, but I'm agnostic, without proof. But I'm not really sure why I still believe. It doesn't scare me that if there was no God, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, but or no God. But
that's funny.
I'm trying to challenge those beliefs, and why do I still kind of cling to that, that comfort in the higher power, or that feeling of, oh, I don't feel alone in the world, and so it does provide that comfort, and there is some evidence, I guess, that for people, prayer does provide health benefits and things like that, meditation, things like that.
Well,
it all comes down to.
There's definitely the perception that it does. Whether or not there's any real efficacy to it or not, it's another question. I don't necessarily know that I clung on to belief in the same way that you do. There definitely was a period of time where I was reluctant to identify myself as an atheist. After 20 some odd years of fundamentalist Christianity and studying to be a minister, you don't just, one day I'm going to be a Baptist minister, and the next day, wow, God's a bunch of hogwash, I'm an atheist now. Right. So there is a process there, and where somebody is or is comfortable within that process doesn't mean they have to. I mean, I know lots of people who prefer to say I'm agnostic, and I think I
heard a joke about that today.
Did you?
Yeah. What's the difference between an agnostic and an atheist?
I don't know.
They both have no gods.
It is good.
And here I thought when I said I don't know, I was answering the question.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the faith does provide for so many people that comfort, that sense of feeling that they're not alone.
Well, it's actually okay to want comfort. I think it's better to be honest about the fact that you're needing comfort and that you're getting comfort for the sake of getting comfort, rather than go through all this rigmarole about believing in something or whatever.
For the people who need
Get
God,
yourself a security blanket and a pacifier,
Yeah, and depending on how you interpret it, I guess the good thing about some faiths is that you get that sort of unconditional love. Like, you can't get that in other areas of your life.
Yeah, that's very
There's
compelling.
a lot of benefit from the community aspect of a church, of being around other people. But the thing
Something
is,
they do very well.
From my point of view, is that I don't see any benefit that you can get at a church from a church, which you can't also get from something without the religious dogma attached.
Certainly, definitely.
But for those handful of people who do, for the people who cannot be moral without a belief that God is commanding them to be moral, I want them to stay in church.
Because
build 10,000 more churches if that's what it takes to keep those people from
keep them off the street.
That's very true. Depending on when their church is teaching them, if it's about
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
All right.
Thanks a lot for calling.
Thanks for your call.
Appreciate it.
And if you or anybody else are interested, like we mentioned the Mongolian thing or any of the other ACA events, but you've got more to talk about.
I've got more to talk about. I thought I might talk about some of the reasons behind religious faith and that sort of thing, and where it kind of comes from. And I actually have a lot of material on it, but let's start with the basics. That beliefs are a very good way of controlling a person's behavior. A person's beliefs drive their behavior. So if I believe that I'm going to be, fed today, going downtown at Mongolian barbecue or something, then I'm going to, probably pack my car up and go down there at some point. And you can kind of flip this around and say, well, a person's true their behavior actually reflects their true beliefs. So you get a lot of mind games where people say, well, I believe such and such, but then they behave differently, right?
It's like, I brought this up the other day, and I don't mean to jump in this.
Go ahead, please do.
I just found this amusing. Most Christians would have a problem with pornography and strippers. Mm-hmm. And yet, and I'm not recommending this for other people. Having done just a cursory look, it's shocking to me the number of women in pornography or stripping or whatever who will be dancing like up on a stage naked and have a cross or a crucifix around their neck.
Well, a lot of the watchers of pornography are Christians.
Sure.
Right?
Well, when you've got 80% of the population, it's not just those other 20% that happen to want to see somebody naked.
Right. It's a very big business.
But it did kind of tie in with the duplicity there.
And of course, to think about New Year's resolutions, right? We always make them at this time of the year. We always say, you think, oh, I'm going to lose some weight or learn more, read more books, or whatever. But when it comes right down to it, you can't just decide what you're going to do about your actions. You actually have to change your beliefs in order to make that effective. So, and you can use this in a negative way. If you control somebody's beliefs, you can effectively control their behavior. And it's a very powerful way to do that because people don't realize they're sort of being manipulated. Changing someone's beliefs actually changes the decisions they make, the choices they make. They don't even make certain choices that would be sort of outside beliefs or contradictory to their beliefs, and they have no sense that they're being controlled. So who controls beliefs? Well, religions control beliefs. We have an article in the Statesman pretty recently that's interesting in several levels. Saturday, December 10th. This is about Virgin Guadalupe, that I've actually done a show on this whole thing. But what's interesting is, well, the myth is that some peasant saw this vision in 1531, and it was supposedly the Virgin Guadalupe, which is really just another name for Mary in this context, and there was a miracle and a painting on the guy's Talmud, the cloak, and all this, right? So. In reality, what was going on here is that this myth was made up, and the artifact was created manufactured by the Catholic Church, and the whole purpose of this was to help conquer the new world, and to make the Indians more docile for the Spanish takeover, because this is very much part of the conquest of. And to this day, the Catholic Church is still making money off this thing, and what just blows my mind on this is there's this article on it in the paper, and there's just not a critical sentence in the whole thing. It's just recounting the myth and saying how wonderful it is and all this crap, and there's just nothing here about the fact that the thing was painted and redone again a couple hundred years later, and gosh, isn't it a miracle that the cloth is newer and hasn't deteriorated and all this. Anyway, so getting back to beliefs and behaviors, well, if you believe that this virgin showed up, maybe you're gonna be docile and be all excited about it, and maybe that'll be part of your culture, and as it is in Mexico, and maybe you'll donate a lot of money to the church. And so through this myth that was manufactured by the Catholic Church, they're making money even still. So that's just a prime example of beliefs and behaviors. We can talk about we'll skip that one. You want to announce the phone number again, and I'll do a little bit more? Or we can.
It's up.
Oh, we'll get the phone number up. Okay. We're still taking callers. We're live today on the January 1st, 2006. Happy New Year.
Woohoo.
Woohoo. We're a live call-in show. We love to have callers come and beat us up, tell us why we're wrong.
And to take a step back for a second, for Cecilia and some others out there, there's nothing that says, well, all right, there is something, but depending on how you look at it, agnosticism and atheism aren't mutually exclusive. There's very much a concept of I'm an agnostic atheist, because one refers, Gnosticism and agnosticism refers to what you know, and the other one, theism and atheism, refers to what you believe. And I'm perfectly willing to say that I don't know that there's no God, but I don't believe there's one. And it's a matter of, until there's sufficient evidence to change that belief, it's not going to change. I'm rational enough that just because somebody said it, or just because there's an old book, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to believe in something extraordinary based on hearsay.
Yeah. So atheism is basically a skeptical position. It's I don't believe until I have some evidence, and that's.
One of the things that kind of dovetails with this, and I had written part of this earlier, is the question of, is atheism faith, or is it a faith? And while most of us would say no, atheism is, the truth is that it can be. I mean, people can believe all kinds of things for good reasons and for bad reasons. For myself, atheism isn't a faith. It's primarily based on reasonable evaluation of all kinds of arguments and evidence and everything else. But there are plenty of people who are atheists and don't have a good reason. It's either they've never considered the questions behind it, maybe that it's somebody who used to be religious and is now mad at God, or denying that type thing. You can have all kinds of bad reasons for believing things.
That's
and
true.
it has no
That's
bearing
true.
on whether or not they're true.
Yeah, I think your reasons are just as important as your conclusion.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, if you assume for a second that I'm correct in my belief and that there is no God, then every single person who believed that there wasn't a God is correct. And it doesn't matter what the reasons were for believing it. What you individually believe has no bearing on the truth. And the thing that science tries to do, and the thing that rationalists like myself attempt to do as best as possible, is say, I want my beliefs to be as in line with reality as I possibly can. I want the best information, the best evidence. I want to look at things and examine them critically and make sure that I'm not wasting time believing, flummery.
Yeah, and even if the truth is unpleasant or you don't want to hear it, it's better to know the truth.
Especially if the truth's unpleasant, I'd say on many occasions. It's hey, would I like there to be a heaven? Sure. Would I like to go on living forever? You betcha. No, I don't have a death wish. I just accept that based on everything I know, I'm going to die. Mm-hmm. And so's he.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And so are you. Hopefully, you get to go on
a
for a
long time from now. Right. Well, let's take a couple callers, and then I'll go back.
We've got Christian. How you doing?
How you doing, guys? Great show. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I wanted to address the question earlier posed about the lunar cycle and the menstrual cycle.
Sure.
Well, I
correlation.
I
don't know where I heard a long time ago, or maybe I read it about this big, expensive study having to do with the correlation between full moons and the rising number of crimes, and they came to the amazing conclusion that it was because there was more moonlight and people could see at night. So I think,
cat burglars, huh? Okay.
Right, exactly.
I don't need a flashlight. It kind of makes sense.
So expounding on that, I would think that because human beings are basically animals coming from way back, that the lunar cycle would have been in sync during the brightest night, so that the male of the species could go out and hunt and find a woman, find a mate.
Oh, okay.
And that going along with the idea that you have women's menstrual cycles that sync up together when one male has a whole bunch of stuff in a cave somewhere, and so for breeding purposes, what have you. So anyway, I was just thinking that that would make a perfect logical argument.
Well, I think that's a fine hypothesis, and there may actually be some evidence one way or the other on that. I think I've heard something to that effect before. So I'm not saying whether that's true or false, but I think that's a fine and interesting argument.
I agree.
And that study should be done to decide whether that's true or not.
And the cool thing is that it's such a fine hypothesis that even if it turns out to be wrong, it was still a fine hypothesis, and it was interesting, and hopefully we would learn something from it.
Well, expounding on that, I think that's the reason why languages are so better developed by females than they are by males. You know, if you're snatched away when you're young or whatever, it would be better for you to be able to learn a new language, and that's why women can learn new languages a lot quicker than men can.
Well, I think it's not a controversial statement to say that women are better wired for relationships and interpersonal communication, and multitasking is another thing that women do very well.
Well,
the reasons behind that is it's a little more murky, but.
Well, I'm trying to, of course, say all this without having any. There are, of course, moral, objections to the whole idea. Whatever. I'm not bringing my own moral viewpoint into that. And I'm certainly, if there's anybody watching this thing thinking, wow, okay, he's giving me permission to go out. No, that ain't it. But it's just theory, and I think it has a lot to, it seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, and that's really good. I hadn't considered a lot of that. Areas like that where we can be looking and doing research and not necessarily having to draw implications as to just because we have an interesting idea and we've decided to investigate it and find out whether or not it's true, even if it may contradict Psalm 58:22, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're out to violate somebody's core belief. I mean, let's get to the truth no matter what it is.
Right.
Yeah, because if we were making the argument to stay away from guys doing bad things to groups of women, then, you have all the guys in Utah that are using religion for that. So, anyway, great show, guys, and happy returns many years ahead.
Thank you for your call.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Let's take one more, and then I'll do a little bit more.
We've got Jay. How you doing?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I've seen it twice already now, Oprah Winfrey and a rerun of her show. Mm-hmm. On the pregnancy when a woman's carrying the child. A lot of it now, they're going back, even not just recently, but quite a few years back, they've gone back to the production of her estrogen while she's carrying this child. Mm-hmm. Now, during certain stages, she produces more or less. If she does not produce the right amount at what they're considering, is what they're trying to study now, and this is medical science. Mm-hmm. The child comes out as a transsexual, bisexual, or homosexual child. It can change it. Uh-huh. And this has all been proven. You got a 3-year-old or 4...
There is a correlation between the hormones experienced in the mother's womb with sexual orientation. There's also correlations with various genes, and you can't say there's necessarily a cause and effect. There may be a relationship or a partial cause. But yes, you're right that there is.
Okay,
there is some
but doing this study, they've also found out that during the 16th to the 18th week, if the doctor goes through, and I guess they take a fluoroscope or whatever, the ultrasound or whatever it is to determine the sex of a child. Mm-hmm. Sometimes this does not happen until the 20th week of her pregnancy.
What doesn't happen?
Determine the sex of the fetus that she's carrying. Mm-hmm. They're also going back now and doing a study that, since this has all come up in the last, I say, 10 to 12 years, to see if this has any effect on what sexual preferences the child has. They'll find that 3% of these right there that they're picking up that are being developed late as to the identity of the sex come out as a gay or homosexual person.
So are you saying that fetuses that have an ambiguous sexuality at a certain stages, is that what you're talking about? Or it sounded like it mattered when they were doing this ultrasound.
No, this is development of the fetus.
You're saying if the sex wasn't detectable at the 16th week, but was detectable at the 20th week,
20th week later,
that late development is significant.
Then they're saying that this child here, that way there's a 3% that they've studied so far, because they haven't looked in this but so many years.
Mm-hmm.
So if this all comes out to be proven in medical science, then what are other people going to holler at that's in the religious world are saying, hey, we've condemned these people because it was a book written by man, and the Pope is telling us, hey, they're not...
right, raises a lot of questions, right? If you can abort such a fetus or manipulate it in some way, we are kind of edging into the whole idea of what's called designer babies, right? Where we're going to have a baby that's got blue eyes or that's smart or whatever. And there's a whole lot of questions there about, kind of big cans of worms.
During the pregnancy, they said they can give you the choice of sex that you want. Now, how they're doing that, I don't know. But if you listen to some of these programs real close that's been on there on medical crap, the woman says, I want a son.
Yeah.
They can develop it where he comes out as a male, or if it's a female. So, this is not, I don't know, it's not man's natural choice. Yeah. Just let the people take.
So I have to stop you here and say, well, we're an atheist show. What does this need? What's the connection to atheism here? What's the connection to religion?
Okay, why? Because I said, you've got the Christian religion condemning everybody that either comes out as a transsexual or a homosexual or bisexual or whatever the gods you want to call it.
Yeah.
Because of a book written by men.
That's right.
Not science.
And there's a lot of evidence, as you said, that homosexuality, a lot of potential causes of it are sort of outside of the personal choices, as they'd like to portray it, of the people involved. Right. It could be something that happened in the mother's womb. It could be the genetics. It could be something way upstream. And how can a religion condemn something that effectively God did?
If they're saying that God gives, they're saying God gives you that child.
Yeah.
I'll let you hear that in all your churches. Well, if a kid goes out and has sex and they get pregnant, well, they don't look at it like I used to. And when you get old, you look at it used to be that was a no-no.
Yep.
Now today, it's God gives me that child, and it's accepted into our society that outside of a marriage, pregnancy is tough luck. You just one that got knocked up. So. But anyway, that's what I was going to say. Man's making a determination to condemn it both ways, and I just wonder if y'all saw the show or not. It's been on there. I saw it twice, and it's been...
She puts on a pretty good show. Even guys like it sometimes.
Yeah, I don't usually watch it, but that day something grabbed me to watch it, pay attention. I said, what in the God?
Yeah, she does some pretty good topics sometimes, yep. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the call. Jay.
Yeah, I think part of it, and I looked into this type of thing before because there is a real important aspect to whether or not you can, how big a role does genetics play in behavior? How big of a role does genetics play in let's say, whether or not somebody is a homosexual? And that has a significance within religions like Christianity that specifically say not only is it wrong, but you're supposed to kill them. Granted, most Christians are sensible enough to disregard that portion of their Bible and not actively running around killing people. But, one of these days, if they're correct, they're going to have to answer to their God about why they didn't do that. I think if you could show, I think what the truth is going to end up being is that there are genetic factors that can determine and help determine whether or not someone is a homosexual. And I think there are also social factors that somebody who may not possess a genetic trait for something can still
yes, the old nature versus nurture debate. Both of them.
As long as there's any aspect that's not genetic, these people will never have to change their mind. Yeah. As long as they can point to any case that's not genetic, even if they have to draw such lines as are you a homosexual versus are you engaged in homosexual behavior? For instance, men in prison often engage in homosexual behavior. Whether or not you would really classify them as homosexuals is another question. even if they had to draw those distinctions, they do so just to keep justifying this because it's the Word of God. And, it doesn't matter. I mean, I recognize that it was written by men and so the most reasonable people, but...
even if homosexuality was a choice, being a Christian is a choice, right?
Yeah.
And it deserves all sorts of protections, right? So why shouldn't other choices have the same protection, even if it is a choice, right?
Yeah, my thing was that even if you show them that there's absolutely no genetic aspect, that this is just somebody's personal preference. So what? It's none of your business. It's none of my business. And if your God says that just because somebody has a different opinion about what they do in the privacy of their bedroom than you do, that you should kill him, your God's an ass. Mm-hmm. He's a thug, a tyrant.
Yeah. Yep.
Things like that I always kind of find silly, because even when I was a practicing Christian studying for the ministry, I recognize that, okay, in the Bible it says homosexuality is a sin. And what I recognize that a lot of Christians don't is that it says homosexuality between two men is a sin. That's right. And it doesn't say anything at all about lesbianism. That's right.
As a matter of fact, absence from the whole damn Bible, yeah.
There's a few verses in Ruth which have led a lot of people to believe that Ruth was gay.
Yeah. Well, then there's the whole natural use of a woman thing, right? For procreation.
Well, that's just the
only purpose of women, right?
They're just property.
You can pull that into the mix.
In some places, in some you always have to pay. You pay a dowry. You're buying the girl as property, and some of the dowries may be land, and in the case of David, it's 200 foreskins. I mean, that's the dowry that he paid for the girl he wanted.
Right, and you own your children too.
Yeah,
until they come of age.
And
when you sell off the female ones, and the male ones become property.
How much is my daughter worth now?
Yeah.
Let's go on to Jim real quick.
Hello.
Yes.
Hey, Jim.
Hello?
What you got for us?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if I'm on. I was just wondering, you said you were a Christian for 25 years?
20-something.
20-something years. I'm just wondering how people who are rational and reasonable get sucked into that for so long. I mean, I know a lot of it has to do with growing up in a family that's expected of you, and that's all you know.
Well, I think upbringing is a big part of it.
It's really very simple. It's upbringing. That's the way I was raised, and it's continual reinforcement. And I'm not saying that I was ever forced, although I'm sure there were one or two times where I didn't want to go to church and I was drugged there anyway.
Right.
My participation wasn't forced. As a matter of fact, in my teens, I was more active in the church and in church ministry opportunities than my parents were. This was completely voluntary. But the thing is that you're getting constant positive reinforcement. You're never spending significant time talking about religious issues with people who don't agree with you.
Right.
Even when you're
everyone
ministering.
agrees and everyone's on the same page.
Right. Yeah. Even like on Sundays when you fill out those little "I'm a guest at your church" and throw it in the offering plate. Mm-hmm. On Mondays we would go out and visit those people because they had essentially requested that somebody come and talk to them.
Right.
Even when you're talking to those people who may have different beliefs, you're not engaged in a conversation with them. You're telling them about your beliefs and why your beliefs are correct and why they should have them as well. And if they already share them, then come on, sign up your membership, join our church, and we'll start collecting your funds.
So how do you view your association with the atheists now? Is that a similar kind of thing where they all have the same mindset?
No, there's a lot more arguing that goes on. The only thing that unifies us is that we don't have a belief in God. Now, where we stand on political issues...
Which is actually a very small thing, actually, in many ways.
And much like Colin McGinn, I actually look forward to a day when the question is kind of a non-issue.
Right. We would rather not be atheists. It's just like we'd rather not be non-alchemists.
But this is my participation. My participation with the ACA and pretty much everybody's participation is at your own level. There's no concept of it as a church in the type of sense that a regular church would be. I mean, there's no donations and dogma. It's just a chance to get together and spend some time with
more like a club,
both like-minded or mostly like-minded people, because we have lots of good disagreements.
But. Yeah, I think it's healthy to see people who are thoughtful and who aren't kind of, because I can understand the religious thing being, this is a community and this is, a good thing for everyone thinking the same way, but in reality, if everyone thought the same way, that would be pretty terrible life, I think.
I like the social aspect that the church provides. I don't like the positive reinforcement of ignorance that the church provides.
Yeah, and any contradiction is just, totally,
get browbeaten or whatever.
Right,
yeah.
right.
They put up the note. We got like 5 minutes left.
Okay.
I got to let you go.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks for calling, Jim. As a reminder for Jim or any atheist-friendly people, we're going to dinner, Mongolian barbecue, San Jacinto, downtown near 2nd Street, and we'll be there between 6:30 and 6:45 or so. We got a few minutes left. You want to go on with something?
Well, I got some more stuff. Let me hit it real quick here. I have a little rift here on who's responsible for beliefs, right? Beliefs sort of if you are definitely responsible for your actions, right? We all hopefully agree on that. I claim that if you transmit your beliefs, you are partially responsible for the actions of those who act on those beliefs, right? So if I brainwash you or tell you a lie, for example, and you go off and do something horrible based on that, well, I'm partially responsible.
That's essentially what Manson was convicted of.
Okay.
It's not like he actually went there and killed anybody.
Oh, that's right. That's right. He played ringleader.
He was the instigator.
I had another example. If you yell fire in a crowded theater.
Right. Oh, that's an example of something that's definitely not free speech.
Yeah, right.
It's something the Supreme Court's outlined.
The person yelling fire, is responsible, at least largely responsible for any trampling or
it kind of falls in the inciting a riot type of thing.
Right.
But
So let's talk about. There's a Doonesbury cartoon on December 18th, Sunday, where a doctor's visiting with a patient, and the patient has tuberculosis. Oh, we'll have to watch the time here. And then the doctor asks, "Well, are you a creationist?" And the guy says, "Why?" "Well, yes, I am. Why do you ask?" And the doctor says, "Because I need you to know whether you want me to treat the bug as it was before antibiotics, or as the multiple drug-resistant strain it has evolved into." "Evolved?" the guy says. Then the doctor says, "Your choice. If you go with the Noah's Ark version, I'll just give you streptomycin." Then the guy says, "What are the newer drugs like?" And then the doctor says, "They're intelligently designed." So it's a funny little cartoon, but it emphasizes the fact that if you are out there based on your beliefs suppressing science and suppressing intelligent design or suppressing the evolution, by goodness, you better be willing to accept the consequences of that. And I would claim that conservative Christianity is partially responsible for abortions caused by the misinformation campaign they're creating. That believers that suppress stem cell research are responsible for shortening the lives of millions of people. And that believers who suppress science are responsible for sabotaging the technology that arises from them, just like in the Dark Ages. And believers should bear the cost of their beliefs. So that's the end of my little spiel.
Yeah, Pat Robertson had made that comment after the Dover decision, or after the election, that the people in Dover had voted God out, and there were a lot of responses that came back to him that said, "Okay, if that's the take you're going to have on it, then don't go see a doctor anymore, because you need to rely on God and not science."
Right. If there are no true believers in the hospital, sort of thing.
Yeah, we got just a minute and some change left, and Phillip, as quick as you can.
You got a quickie?
I got a quickie.
Okay.
I'm honored to talk to atheists because they all think.
Okay, we try to anyway.
Oh, you know what I mean.
I definitely like to think.
No, I mean atheists. I mean, every time we talk, you think. You're smart. You're intelligent.
Well, thank you. Well, we try to learn about the world because that's a good way of living, we think.
You don't. I guess that may be the one main thing about atheists. They don't fear to think and question.
That is something we all share. We like to question.
Yeah. I got to cut you off there. We only got a couple seconds left.
Thank you for your call.
Thanks a lot for the call. And to everybody else who called, if you didn't get on or have other questions, you can email us, tv@atheist-community.org. We'll be back next week, and as a reminder, the email address, joezamecki@hotmail.com, if you're interested in information about the Interspace Tour.
Or look at our website.
Or you can visit the ACA website for more information. And for those of you joining us afterwards, we'll be at Mongolian Barbecue downtown.
See ya. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Oh, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
'Cause